Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my epic rant on the 2012 remake Total Recall. It's not very smart, it's kinda sexy, and it's definitely not action-packed, because there are more lens flares in this fucking film than there are action sequences. Now, before I go any further with my total destruction of this remake, I want to give a special shout out once again for Jonathan for requesting another review. He wanted to hear my thoughts on this film, so here we are. Now, for the purpose of this review, I not only watched the theatrical cut of this piece of shit again, I also watched the extended version, and the extended version didn't really fix, honestly, that many of the film's problems. You saw some scenes with Ethan Hawke as Hauser. There was a couple little more moments of character development and dialogue. There was a little bit more of an edge in some scenes, but nothing to the point where it came even remotely close to the visceral violence of the 1990 film. Now, 2012's Total Recall is a movie that you will honestly have a hard time recalling after you've watched it because it is that unmemorable. And it also is a sanitized, completely castrated version of the 1990 film. It tries to be its own thing, which I will give it some credit for, but then at the same time, it also tries to be the 1990 film, with certain characters being the same and having references to the 1990 movie, like 2 Weeks and so on. The film is directed by Len Wiseman, and to me, Len Wiseman has done a lot more impressive work in other movies. This film just was lackluster to me when it comes to its visuals. Everything just looked too clean or clinical, or when a shot looked like it could impress, it looked like something out of a video game. It looked like a cutscene from Deus Ex Machina or some other sort of futuristic video game from around the same time. And it also did not help at all that this film is jammed to the brim with obnoxious lens flares. I don't know what the hell Len Wiseman was thinking. It was not a wise decision because it's not only distracting, but it's obnoxious. It's irritating to see all these lens flares popping up on the screen. Then, to make matters worse, none of these action sequences, when they are there, really have that rush that you want out of an action film. Even the car chase with the flying cars, even that felt kind of slow. And it also doesn't help either that when it comes to the visual style, it seems like Len Wiseman was just trying to do his best Minority Report impression. So it didn't even feel like it was his own unique style. It just looked like another movie, which is another problem with this film. Is Total Recall just reminds you not only of Total Recall, but it reminds you of other films that are a million times better and more memorable than it is. It'll remind you of Minority Report. It'll remind you of The Fifth Element. It'll remind you of I, Robot. And all of those movies are much better films. They are also films that feature much better direction. Sequences where it's supposed to have some sort of emotional weight, it completely falls flat because either Len Wiseman is not really the guy to bring that to the forefront, or he just isn't really able to elevate the material that he's given to work with visually. And it's one of those things where this movie does have a budget, and there are some times in the film where it does look like it's on the screen, and there are some sequences where it features practical stunt work and practical effects and practical sets. But there's other sequences where, yeah, it just looks very fake. It looks like a cutscene from a video game. And it also has this weird filtering, which just washes out a lot of the color and just makes everything blue and gray. And then you throw in lens flares on top of that, and it's just an eyesore. The script is by Kurt Wimmer and Mark Bombach, and this is a bomb of a script. This is a dud. This screenplay sucks. It's boring. It takes a lot of the fun and the very aspects that made the 1990 film so iconic and just completely erases them for the most part. Quaid here is a complete, total NPC, boring character with no charisma and no personality to speak of. The villains also don't have much charisma or personality except for Kate Beckinsale, who plays a combination of Laurie and Richter. And other than her, like, everyone in this is very bland and just doesn't really have a lot going for them. And it's not necessarily 100% due to the fault of the cast. It really does come down to this script where you don't have fun lines of dialogue, at least not ones that'll make you laugh, and in a positive way anyway. I mean, the line where Kate Beckinsale's character Laurie says, "I give good wife." Yeah, that's a classic grade A line right there. Or the moments where Quaid and his work buddy are talking about putting their asses in seats. Yeah, that's also something that is just really noteworthy and just strong when it comes to the dialogue. And it also is too political. Like, it's trying to do something different, which I am all for, but something different being more political to me is not really a positive. It just makes the film all the more forgettable because it's this whole drama that I don't give a shit about. I don't care about the drama with the fall and Cohagen and these other freedom fighters who are labeled as terrorists. I don't give a shit about any of this because when it comes to the 1990 film, you actually cared because you got to know the mutants more and actually got to see them suffer. You don't see any of that in this film. So there's no reason to really give a shit. Also, the fall, what a fail of a concept that was. It's just a giant elevator. Wow. So exciting. So amazing. A giant elevator. What a concept. Yeah, it's just a giant elevator that goes through the center of the earth, which leads to some decent moments with zero gravity in the film's climax, but since it's PG-13, all the potential impact of that is completely destroyed because it's PG-13. Like, when people get shot, there's no blood, there's no anything, so you don't get that extra burst of visceralness that would make a sequence like that stand out. And speaking of standing out, like, I have a hard time remembering most of the stuff that happened in this film's script because it's such a forgettable story and a forgettable movie. It follows the same path for the most part as the 1990 film, with Quaid working at a job, and then he wants to go to recall, and instead of him wanting to go on a trip to Mars, it's some other generic thing because they don't want to do Mars because then that would be too much of the same thing. This film's almost one of those examples of a remake that tries too hard to be different to the point where it honestly takes away something that was so integral to the success of Total Recall. Like, I might have been kind of cool to see another director and another writer's interpretation of Mars, and a colony on Mars and aliens and so on. But instead, it just takes place on Earth. And that's just generic. And been there, done that shit when it comes to the science fiction genre, especially in 2012. So Ghost of Recall, of course, his memory cap gets popped. Then he starts kicking ass. And then he gets targeted by Cohagen and his forces. Then he meets up with Melina. And he then gets involved with this whole plot to try to stop the next Quado. And it's the same shit. It's the twist about the double cross and how he was set up and Quaid was never real and he's Hauser the entire time and Cohagen set things up so it would be a trap. It's the same fucking shit, just a different movie. And then there's some lame battle between Quaid and a robot, and then he fights Cohagen hand to hand in the rain, and he blows up the fall. And there's another sequence at the end where he is in the hospital and Lori comes for him, and so he has to wind up shooting her. And then of course he gets back with Melina, and everything's all hunky-dory and great, and everyone lives happily ever after. And I'm definitely happy because this boring lens flare annoyance is over, and I don't have to sit through this shit anymore. So yeah, this script sucks. There's no reason to care about the drama with the fall and the colony and any of this other shit. There's no reason to really be that invested in the villains because they are completely bland and just milquetoast. There's no reason to care about the lead because he's not as engaging or as interesting as Quaid is in the 1990 film. There, and speaking of the 1990 film, they even do the whole, hey, you're back at recall, and all you need to do is shoot somebody, and show that you're not in the that you don't want to be a part of the simulation anymore. And even that was changed in a way that just made it less effective. Instead of it being a surprise of, oh shit, he's sweating, he's lying, I'm gonna shoot him. Instead, it's this whole thing where, oh, you need to shoot Melina to show that you want to go back to reality. And then he ultimately decides not to because of almost the same reason, if I remember correctly. Like, he sees his friend sweat, or he sees something that makes him realize that this isn't a simulation. And it's just one of those things that's like, why are we going over the same beats? Like, what is the point of a remake if you're just going to give people the same beats, but done in a way that sucks? I'm just saying, I don't know what the point is. I mean, I'll take a remake like The Blob from 1988 any day of the week over shit like Total Recall, because it actually tries a lot harder to be its own film and do something new. And the cast here also sucks. I mean, Colin Farrell is an absolutely pathetic lead. He cannot carry this film to save his life. He's not anywhere near as charismatic or likable enough to be the lead in a film like this. It's so painful to watch him try to carry this movie, because every time he tries, he just gets crushed by the weight of this film. And any scene he's in with Jessica Biel or Kate Beckinsale or Bryan Cranston, he's just completely blown off the screen. Like, you can't say that about Arnold Schwarzenegger in the sequences that he has in Total Recall, because Arnold Schwarzenegger is a larger-than-life Hollywood personality. Colin Farrell is just a guy. He's a Jag or a Jaffo. He's just another fucking observer. Kate Beckinsale, I mean, I could kind of deal with her because at least she was somewhat threatening at times, and she had some semblance of a personality, almost to the point where I kind of wish that this was just a gender flipped version of Total Recall with her as a lead, because she would have done a hell of a lot better job than Colin Farrell. Jessica Biel is what she is. She's nice to look at, but that's about it. Like, she is such a limited actress, and it is definitely on display here as Melina. And any scene that she has with Colin Farrell doesn't work for me because they don't have any chemistry. There's no romantic chemistry between these two. Uh, Bryan Cranston, I like Bryan Cranston, but he feels like he's wasted. It's a similar feeling that I had for Michael Keaton in the RoboCop remake. I feel the same way about Bryan Cranston here. The writing is so shitty that he really does not have any chance to make himself provide a standout performance because the writing is so bad. It's not really necessarily his fault that he's not able to fill Ronnie Cox's shoes, but he's never given an opportunity to really make the role his own, let alone make the role something special. Bokeem Woodbine, he played Harry, Quaid's friend, who then is actually an agent who works with Cohagen. He's there, but you can kind of tell that this is sort of a paycheck role for him. It's not really the best performance. Bill Nighy is Matthias, the leader of the Resistance. Who gives a fuck? Who cares? At least with Quado, you had the interesting hook with the Siamese twin mutant angle. Here, he's just a guy. Just another just generic thing about this movie. He's just a guy. Nothing special. John Cho is just another guy. He plays McClane, a rep at Recall. And John Cho was kind of having some fun too. Honestly, you could have had John Cho as the lead. That probably would have been better than Colin Farrell. And yeah, Ethan Hawke makes the uncredited cameo as Hauser in the director's cut. Because in the theatrical version of the film, Hauser still looks like Colin Farrell. And has always looked like Colin Farrell. But in the extended cut, which I don't know why they labeled the director's cut on certain sources. There is no director's cut. Well, I mean, it kind of is. I mean, it's the extended director's cut, but it's kind of confusing because I don't really think it's actually a true director's cut. But either way, in the extended version of it, Hauser is played by Ethan Hawke. And there's this whole thing about how Hauser was changed surgically to look like Colin Farrell. And that was kind of interesting, but it still doesn't really add up to much of anything. Because it's still a lot of the same shit, with Hauser being a part of the Resistance and then being programmed by Cohagen to trap the Resistance and so on. Like, it's just there's nothing to Hauser here. It's like there's not much to this fucking film. I mean, the cinematography by Paul Cameron is nothing that's special or spectacular or amazing or jaw-dropping. You've seen better visuals in Fifth Element, Minority Report, even something like Surrogates. I mean, it's really not anything that amazing or awe-inspiring when it comes to the visuals or the style or the look of the film. I also think the cinematographer might also be somewhat to blame for the fucking lens flares, so that's definitely not a plus. The editing by Christian Wagner, once again, nothing special, unremarkable editing. At times, the editing is a little too choppy and hurts some of the attempts that the film has for action, especially during some of the car chases. The music by Harry Gregson Williams, I don't remember a single note. I cannot recall a single note of this score. It's every bit as generic and one note as pretty much everything else in this fucking movie. And it's like 118 minutes, at least the theatrical cut, and it drags. It really feels like 218 minutes because, like I said, there's no reason to get invested in the story because it's essentially the same story as the 1990 film, but with more politics, a stupid fucking giant elevator, and it's not even on Mars. And the same characters and sort of the same sort of dynamics, but it's nowhere near as effective. You have an unbelievably snooze inducing, boring lead who's just a Jaffo or a Jag, and the villains, they don't add any excitement or fun to the film other than maybe Kate Beckinsale. And there are some sequences where guns will be fired and there's explosions and there's some fisticuffs and martial arts, but none of it has any weight. Just like the zero gravity sequences, it's kind of ironic that one of the film's most memorable scenes is this action sequence that takes place in zero gravity, and the film itself has almost zero gravity to speak of when it comes to its characters, when it comes to the writing, when it comes to the action sequences. The thing that has the most gravity in this movie are the fucking lens flares. It really is. Like, Total Recall is one of those movies you'll watch it and you'll forget about it for the most part, but the one thing that will leave a lasting impression is the thousands of fucking lens flares in the movie, because they're so blindingly obvious and in your face. So, yeah, I really don't know what else to say about Total Recall, Total Rehash, Total Lens Flares, other than thanks for watching my rant, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.